They said it was just temporary, until I got back on my feet. But the door they gave me didn't have a lock, and one day I found it locked, from the outside. When my husband died, it felt like my world deflated. Not exploded, no, just slowly folded in on itself like wet paper. I remember standing in our bedroom, his shirt still in the closet, his cologne lingering faintly in the air, and realizing I didn't even know what day of the week it was. I was 63, and I had no idea what came next. My son, Ethan, he offered what he called a soft place to land. Said I could stay with them a while, just until I figured things out. Ethan had always been kind, practical, maybe a little too quick to fix things with a spreadsheet, but I trusted him. His wife, Mallory, she smiled when I moved in, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. They gave me the room at the end of the hall. It was small, pale yellow walls, a twin bed, and a folding chair near the window. The carpet was stained, and the closet smelled like mothballs. But I told myself it was fine. I didn't need much. I told myself I was lucky. I kept quiet. I cleaned up after dinner. I refolded towels that didn't need refolding. I asked permission before I used the laundry machine. I made myself smaller, in every way I could think of. At first, Mallory thanked me for the dinners, said the house had never been so clean. Ethan would come home late, hug me absent-mindedly, say, "Thanks, Mom," and walk past like I was part of the furniture. I tried not to take it personally, but something changed after the second week. Mallory stopped coming into the kitchen when I cooked. Ethan stopped answering when I asked how work was. One night, I came out of my room and found a sticky note on the bathroom mirror. "Please don't use the upstairs shower after 8 p.m. It wakes Mallory." I stared at it for a long time, not because it upset me, but because it was the first time they didn't say it to my face. And I realized this wasn't a soft place to land anymore. It was a place to be quiet, invisible. And the worst part? I started to agree with them. I started thinking maybe I was asking too much, just by being there. That night, I closed the door to my little room, and for the first time I tried to imagine what it would feel like to be locked in, and not noticed for days. The first few days I told myself over and over, they meant well. They really did. Ethan had always been thoughtful, even as a boy. He'd cry when I scraped my hand washing dishes, run to the cabinet for a Band-Aid like it was a race. And Mallory. She was always polite, polished, the kind of woman who brought hostess gifts and signed birthday cards with full sentences. I believed them when they said, "Make yourself at home." I just didn't realize they meant temporarily. The first morning, I got up early. Too early, probably. I was used to coffee brewing at sunrise, bacon sizzling in the pan before the news even started. So I made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, a little fruit. Nothing fancy. When they came downstairs, Ethan smiled, gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. Mallory hesitated. She blinked at the plates like they were unexpected guests. "Oh, wow," she said, setting her phone on the counter. "You really didn't have to do all this." "I like to," I said. "It's how I start my day." She nodded, slowly. But her smile was already fading by the time she picked up her fork. I vacuumed after they left for work, did a load of towels, reorganized the pantry. Nothing drastic, just shifting the cans so labels faced out. It felt good having a purpose again, even if the only one who noticed was me. But on the fourth night, Mallory came into the kitchen and said, "Hey, Martha, next time, just leave the laundry in the basket, okay? I have a system." A system. That word stayed in my head like a pebble in a shoe. I nodded, of course, said, "Of course," twice, actually. Then I folded the laundry in my room door half shut. The days blurred after that. I cooked dinner most nights unless they ordered in. I washed dishes quietly. I tiptoed to the fridge for milk. I tried not to ask too many questions. And I noticed Ethan stopped calling me Mom, just said, "Hey," or Can you pass that? Mallory started referring to me in third person when talking to Ethan. Did you ask your mum if she needs anything? Like I wasn't standing right there. It was small. Nothing dramatic. No yelling, no cold stares. Just a slow withdrawal of warmth. A polite retreat. Like they were waiting for me to pick up on something unspoken. Some invisible sign that I'd overstayed without ever being truly welcomed. And maybe I did pick up on it. Maybe I just didn't want to believe that the people I loved were turning into strangers, while I was still setting the table for three. It started with the silences, not the peaceful kind, but the loaded kind. The kind that hums behind walls and settles between footsteps. I'd be in the kitchen stirring soup, and I could feel it. That stillness when someone's holding something back. One evening, I overheard them in the living room. Their voices low, sharp around the edges. She's always there, Ethan. I walk out of the shower, and she's folding towels on the couch. I can't breathe. Ethan didn't answer right away. I stood by the sink, my hands still wet, heart thudding. Then I heard him, soft, tired. She's trying. She doesn't have anywhere else to go. That's not the point, Mallory snapped. It's been 3 weeks. 3. And I feel like a guest in my own house. I could have walked in. I could have said, I'll leave. I could have made it easy for them, but instead, I turned the faucet on. Let the sound of running water drown out the rest. That night, I lay in bed with the door cracked an inch, just enough to hear the TV murmuring down the hall. I stared at the ceiling, counting the tiny flickers of headlights passing the window, and wondered when exactly I had become a burden, not just a mother. The next morning, Mallory didn't come downstairs for coffee. Ethan poured himself a cup, didn't look up when I said good morning. I asked how work was going, and he said, fine, like the word hurt his teeth. I kept moving. That's what I do. I vacuumed again, softer this time. I washed dishes before they stacked up. I folded only my laundry, not theirs. I even asked before I used the stove. Is it all right if I cook tonight? I said, voice too cheerful. Mallory blinked, surprised I was asking, and said, sure, whatever you want. But I felt it. The way she looked at Ethan, that quiet look between them. A message I wasn't supposed to hear but did anyway. I stopped watching my favourite shows in the living room, started eating in my room with a tray on my lap. I told myself it was just easier. For everyone. I told myself they were just adjusting. But deep down, I knew better. They hadn't expected me to stay this long, and I had been so desperate to feel needed that I didn't see I was slowly being erased. Not with words, but with that look, the one people give when they're waiting for you to take the hint and go. That night felt no different than the others. At first, I made roasted chicken with rosemary and lemon, mashed potatoes with extra butter, and green beans with garlic. I even set the table with the good dishes, the ones Mallory said were too delicate for everyday use. I thought maybe a nice dinner would warm things again, remind them of something softer. Ethan came in late, loosened his tie, kissed Mallory on the cheek, then sat down with a tired groan. Mallory was already scrolling through her phone when I brought the food to the table. She didn't look up until the plates were full. The silence was thick, not angry, but heavy, like humidity before a storm. I tried to keep it light. Remember when you were 8 and tried to make mashed potatoes with orange juice instead of milk? I laughed gently. You said it gave them personality. Ethan smiled barely. Mallory didn't laugh. She set her phone down and folded her hands in her lap. Her voice came out smooth, practiced. I think, she said slowly, maybe it's time we think about other options. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Ethan looked at his plate, chewing like his life depended on it. I swallowed. Other options? I asked, even though I already knew. She met my eyes, calm and calculated. Just something more stable, for everyone's sake. For everyone's sake. Ethan still said nothing. He stabbed a green bean and stared at it like it might rescue him. the rest of the meal blurred. I don't remember the taste of the food, only the way the clink of silverware sounded like punctuation. Sharp. Final. When dinner was over, I cleared the plates quietly. Mallory didn't offer to help. Ethan disappeared into the garage, said something about a call he had to make. I stood in the kitchen, holding the dish towel in both hands, trying not to let them tremble. My heart wasn't broken. Not exactly. Just bruised. Tired. They didn't ask me to leave. Not in words. But there's a kind of invitation that isn't said aloud. A chair too many at the table. A silence too long after a suggestion. A meal eaten without looking up. I went to my room. I didn't cry. I just sat there for a long time staring at the little window and thinking, this isn't my home. I'm just passing through. A guest with an expiration date. And now, the countdown had started. It was a Tuesday morning. Rainy, quiet, the kind of grey that clings to your skin. Mallory had already left for work. Ethan was upstairs shaving. I went into the kitchen to make tea, and that's when I saw it. A single sheet of paper on the counter, not hidden, not addressed to anyone, just sitting there in plain sight next to the fruit bowl. I picked it up slowly, already feeling the sting in my chest before I read a single word. It was a printout. Affordable senior living options, transitional housing, assisted support, subsidised studios, Greater County listings. Rows of addresses, application deadlines, requirements. My name wasn't on the paper, but I could feel it between every line. I stared at it for a long time, heart pounding, hands cold. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Mallory had printed it for someone at work. Maybe Ethan was helping a neighbour's mother. But then I saw the notes scribbled in the margin, in Mallory's tidy handwriting. Call for availability. Good reviews. Clean. Bus stop nearby. Clean. Like I was something that needed to be managed, sanitised, relocated. I put the paper down exactly where I found it. I didn't say a word when Ethan came down. He kissed the top of my head like always, grabbed his keys and said, "See you later, Mom." Like everything was normal. Like they hadn't just erased me from their lives with a single click of the printer. I made tea anyway, drank it standing by the sink. Then I went to my room, closed the door, and opened the old suitcase I'd kept under the bed, just in case. I didn't pack much, just what I came with. A few sweaters, my husband's photo, my pills, a worn paperback I hadn't finished reading. I didn't fold anything neatly. I didn't even zip the case until it bulged. It didn't matter. I left the bed sheets tucked in. I wiped down the bathroom sink. I wrote nothing. Said nothing. At 10:43 that night, while the house slept, I opened the front door and stepped into the cold air. It smelled like wet grass and silence. I didn't look back. I walked 2 blocks to the 24-hour gas station, sat on a bench outside with my suitcase at my feet, watched the glow of a vending machine flicker like a tired heartbeat, and for the first time in my life, I had no address, no plan, no one to call. But somehow, I still felt more visible than I had in that house. The cafe didn't ask questions. It was the kind that stayed open all night. Fluorescent lights, burnt coffee, sticky booths. I ordered a small tea I couldn't finish and sat by the window like I was waiting for someone who'd never show. No one looked twice at me. That was the mercy of places like this. People came here to disappear. By 4 in the morning, I couldn't keep pretending. My legs were stiff, my head ached, and the waitress had refilled my cup twice without asking. I left a crumpled dollar and a quiet thank you, and stepped back into the cold. I found a public bench near the bus stop, the kind with rusted metal arms and a view of nothing but cracked sidewalk. I pulled my coat tight and tried to shrink myself like I'd done in their house. Only now there were no walls to press against. My suitcase sat beside me like a dog waiting for commands. It held everything I owned now, and somehow it still felt too heavy. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I watched the street lamps flicker and counted the cars that passed. 12. Then I lost count. By sunrise, I was shaking. Not just from the cold, but from the weight of it all. The shame, the disbelief, the terrifying freedom of having nowhere left to be. I walked, found a bus terminal, spent my last $20 on a one-way ticket to anywhere with a name I recognized. I chose Havenbrook. I'd been there once, years ago, with my husband. We had coffee by the lake and bought jam from a farmer's market. I didn't know anyone there. That felt like a blessing. The ride was silent. I stared out the window the whole time, my reflection in the glass a stranger I didn't want to greet. When I arrived, I wandered. Walked until my legs gave out, then sat on a bench outside a church. A woman came by, gentle voice, clipboard in hand. "You okay, Mom?" I opened my mouth to lie, but nothing came out. She brought me to a shelter, a plain building with flickering lights and linoleum floors. I filled out a form. Age, 63. Emergency contact, blank. They gave me a cot, thin blanket, a locker. I cried in the shower, quietly, like always. I didn't tell Ethan where I was. I didn't tell anyone, because the shame wasn't just that I had nowhere to go. It was that the people who should have made room chose not to. Her name was Dolores. She wore oversized glasses, orthopedic shoes, and her grey hair in a tight bun that made her look strict until she smiled. Then her whole face softened, like sunlight through clouds. She wasn't a resident, not anymore. Used to be a social worker, retired now but still came in a few times a week just to talk, just to listen. I didn't want to be listened to. Not at first. I didn't even want to speak. I kept my head down, folded laundry, helped in the kitchen when I could. I became the woman who always said thank you and never made a fuss. But Dolores had a way of finding you. Not with questions, but with presence. She'd sit beside you in silence until you either got up and walked away, or cracked open. One morning, I was peeling carrots. She sat next to me, no clipboard, no pity, just her and her coffee. She nodded toward my hands. "You cut like someone who's been slicing carrots for 40 years. I shrugged. "Try 50, she smiled. "Bet you were the kind of woman who made dinner even when no one noticed." I froze. The carrot in my hand went soft. I didn't say anything, but something in me sank, or surfaced. I couldn't tell which. She reached into her oversized tote bag and pulled out a small red notebook. It looked cheap, like something from a dollar store, but the pages were thick and the cover was soft like leather. "Here," she said, placing it in front of me. "Write it down." I looked at her, confused. "Write what down?" "All of it," she said. "The things you're afraid to say out loud, the words you swallowed, the nights you didn't sleep, the meals you made that no one thanked you for. Write it all." I blinked. "Why?" She sipped her coffee, eyes steady on mine. "Because someday you'll need to remember exactly how strong you are." I didn't take it right away. But she left it there, like a gift I hadn't earned yet. That night, I sat on my cot with the red notebook in my lap. I stared at the first blank page for a long time. My hand hovered over it like it was something sacred. And then, slowly, I wrote, "They gave me a spare room and called it love. But when the door finally closed, it wasn't to protect me. It was to shut me out." I kept writing until my hand cramped and the lights flickered off for the night. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel invisible. I almost threw the envelope away. It arrived on a Wednesday, tucked between flyers and donation forms. No return address, just my name in block letters. Not resident, not to whom it may concern. Just my name. Martha Whitaker. Like someone out there still remembered it. I turned it over twice before opening it. The paper inside was thick, real stationery, the kind people don't use anymore. And at the top in careful handwriting was a name I hadn't spoken in years. Joseph Adler. He'd been my husband's oldest friend. They served together in the military, stayed close all their lives, even when time and distance stretched them thin. Joseph had a voice like gravel and a heart like a blanket. Warm, rough, always there when you needed it. The letter was short, no frills, just him, talking like he always did. Plain, direct, no apologies. Martha. I know James wouldn't want you to be left like this. I'm sorry it took me so long to reach out. I didn't know he passed until last month, but before he got sick, he asked me to make sure you were okay if anything ever happened. Said he didn't want you to be forgotten. He left something behind, not much, but enough. It's in a trust, quiet. Not through the family, just for you. I've already spoken to the bank. It's yours, no strings, no explanation needed. You deserved more. Always did. Joseph. There was an attached form, routing numbers, an account already in my name. The total wasn't life-changing. It wouldn't buy a house or retire me on a beach, but it was more money than I'd seen in years. Enough for a deposit, a few months of rent, a phone that wasn't prepaid, a bed that wasn't donated. I sat on the edge of my cot and read the letter 3 times. My hands trembled the way they had the night I left Ethan's house. But for a different reason now. I hadn't been looking for rescue. I wasn't waiting to be saved. But here it was, anyway. Not charity, but care. Quiet, thoughtful care, set in motion by a man who wasn't here to see it land. I folded the letter carefully, pressed it flat, placed it inside the red notebook between 2 pages of ink-stained memory. That night I told Dolores. She didn't ask how much, she just smiled, squeezed my hand and said, "Now go find a place where your name is on the door, not on an envelope." And for the first time in a long time, I believed I could. I found it on a bulletin board at the shelter, a flyer pinned between a coupon for canned beans and a Bible study invitation. Efficiency Studio, utilities included, no credit check. The ink was fading. Half the tear-off tabs were gone. I took one. The place was small, smaller than my room at Ethan's house, if I'm being honest. But it had a locking door, a working stove, a window that faced a brick wall, and most importantly, no one waiting for me to leave. The landlord barely asked questions, cash up front month to month. The carpet was threadbare and the ceiling fan ticked like a clock that forgot what time was. But it was mine. My name on the mailbox scribbled in blue ink. Martha Whitaker. Not Mom, not guest, just me. I spent the first night sleeping on an air mattress with a towel for a pillow. The second night too. By the third, I stopped counting. I didn't decorate. Not really. I lined my books along the baseboard, placed Joseph's letter in the drawer next to the bed, and thumbtacked a single photo of James and me on the fridge. The smile on his face reminded me I used to have one too. I kept quiet. Didn't knock on neighbours' doors. Didn't open mine when they knocked on mine. I walked with my keys between my fingers and my shoulders tight. This part of town wasn't friendly, but it was honest. No one pretended to care. And somehow that was easier. At the community centre down the block, they offered free classes. Mostly empty rooms with dusty folding chairs, but the words stuck anyway. Know your rights as a tenant. Understanding credit. Small business basics for seniors. I took every flyer, sat in the back, wrote notes in the red notebook Dolores gave me. I learned about deposits and inspections and legal clauses buried in rental agreements. I learned how to read the fine print, not just on leases, but on people. I started recognizing the difference between kindness and tolerance, between help and control. Most days I didn't talk to anyone, but my world got a little louder inside. The silence started feeling less like punishment and more like peace. Sometimes I still cried, usually in the shower where the sound got lost in the pipes, but it didn't last as long, because now I had a door that only I could open. And even though I had nothing fancy inside, it finally felt like I belonged there. Not because someone let me stay, but because I chose it myself. It started as curiosity, just a late-night scroll through real estate listings on the shelter's old computer lab. I wasn't looking to buy anything. I barely had enough for rent and tea. But something about the numbers soothed me. Rent yields, market dips. Words that used to sound like a foreign language started making sense when I read them slowly, over and over like prayers. One night I saw a property listing that made my breath hitch. Not the address. The name of the management company. Bramley and Pine. I hadn't heard it in years, but I knew it instantly. They handled the property where Ethan and Mallory lived. They sent the rent statements, fixed the broken faucets, mailed the lease renewals. I used to sort their envelopes from the junk mail. I clicked. It wasn't their building exactly, but a small multifamily unit, same company, same maintenance schedule, same postal zone. It was up for partial investment through a quiet under-the-radar program they offered to non-traditional investors. People like me. I stared at the screen. Then I clicked again. The paperwork was dense. Legal language layered like fog. I printed it all, sat on my floor with a highlighter, and read it line by line until my back ached. I didn't understand all of it. Not yet. But I understood enough. Enough to know I could do it. I called the number listed on the second page and asked questions. Polite, measured, curious. I didn't say much about myself. I didn't have to. I had the funds from the trust, and that was all they really cared about. I created a legal trust. Dolores helped me find someone who specialized in anonymous filings. We named it Willow Fern Holdings. No mention of Martha Whitaker, no fingerprints. A month later, it was done. I owned 18% of a building, 3 blocks from where my son lived. It was small, unremarkable, but mine. A few weeks later, I walked past Ethan's mailbox, just to see it. I stood across the street, heart thudding like I was trespassing. Their names were still printed neatly, Ethan Whitaker and Mallory Whitaker. Below it in the same column, I saw a sticker I hadn't noticed before. Managed by Bramley and Pine. I smiled. Not because I wanted revenge, but because of the irony. They'd spent so long pretending I didn't belong. Now I belonged to the very structure that held their roof in place, and they'd never even notice, because people rarely look at the name on the mailbox unless it's missing. The first rent increase was small, $25. Just enough to be noticed, not enough to be questioned. It was standard. The market was shifting, utilities were higher, property taxes bumped again. It was all in the report Bramley and Pine sent to investors. Nothing personal, just the math. But I knew Ethan. $25 wasn't about the money. It was about the principle, about control, about feeling like someone else was making decisions in his house. Mallory posted about it first, a long, winding post on social media, vague but pointed. Is it just me, or are landlords getting bold lately, charging more for less? Feels like tenants are being punished for existing. There were hashtags, angry emojis, and a filtered photo of their leaky faucet. I read it with a cup of tea and the window cracked open. A week later, the rent went up again, this time across the portfolio, $50. Then another $10 for building fees. The board approved it. I didn't vote. I didn't have to. It wasn't retaliation. It was business. Legal, clean, predictable. The numbers didn't lie, but watching them squirm, that was personal. I started attending tenant board meetings. Not theirs, of course, not directly, but the same system, same policies. I sat in folding chairs with paper cups of coffee, listening to people argue about trash pickup and parking permits. No one knew who I was. I was just another name on a clipboard. Martha L. from Willow Fern Holdings. Quiet. Friendly. Invisible by design. But I took notes. I learned which clauses tenants ignored in their leases. I learned what kind of requests got denied and why. I learned how little people actually understood the buildings they lived in, who owned them, who controlled them, who decided what their peace and comfort cost per square foot. Ethan filed a complaint through the portal. I saw a copy of it at the quarterly meeting. The cost is becoming unreasonable. The building hasn't improved. If anything, it's worse. Who exactly is making these decisions? I almost laughed. Mallory submitted her own, with photos. Cracks in the ceiling. A crooked cabinet. She annotated every image like a lawyer building a case. They didn't know I was in the room. Not with them. Not against them. Just above them, quietly watching the system they took for granted finally shift in their direction. They used to look at me like I was the problem that wouldn't leave. Now I was the name on the paper they couldn't find, the one making all the problems official. It came in a stack of paperwork, quarterly updates, maintenance reports, budget revisions, and a tenant satisfaction survey. I almost skipped it. Those forms were always the same. Too many boxes, not enough truth. But then I saw the address. Unit 3B. Ethan Whitaker. Mallory Whitaker. The handwriting stopped me cold. Ethan had always printed in block letters, tight, straight, like he was afraid of curves. But here, the answers were rushed, slanted, angry. How satisfied are you with the current property management? He checked. Very dissatisfied. Do you feel heard as a tenant? He wrote. No one is listening. That's the problem. We pay more, get less, and everything takes longer. It's like we don't matter. I read it twice, the second time slower. The bitterness bled through the page like ink left in the rain. The next document was a scanned letter, uploaded through the tenant portal. It was from Mallory, typed, of course, perfect grammar, bullet points. But at the bottom, her signature, in that same careful cursive I'd seen on birthday cards. To the best mother-in-law a woman could ask for. Back when things were still polite. I traced the loop of the M with my eyes, not my fingers. Some memories are too thin to touch. Her letter was sharp, cold, but organised. We've noticed a decline in service quality since the last increase. The unit is showing signs of neglect. We request immediate attention to these matters or will consider alternative housing options. I smiled at the word, alternative. She'd always liked pretending she had more choices than she did. What they didn't know was that the building had just passed inspection. Clean marks across the board. I'd made sure of it myself. The hallway lights were replaced, the sidewalk was repaved, the water pressure tested and fine. No, this wasn't about the apartment. This was about discomfort, about feeling powerless, about realizing someone else held the strings, and not knowing who. I could have flagged the survey, replied to the letter, called a meeting, but I didn't. I just filed it away, along with all the others. Another paper in a pile. Another voice shouting into a void built by their own silence. They used to avoid my eyes at the dinner table. Now they couldn't even see the chair I'd quietly pulled out for myself. 3 floors above them, and still rising. They wanted someone to blame. They just didn't know they'd already handed me the pen, years ago. It was late afternoon, the kind of slow hour when emails stop coming and the office hums with printer noise and weak coffee. I was reviewing repair logs, half listening to the front desk clerk chat about water heater replacements, when I heard the door fly open. Heavy footsteps, quick, angry. "Excuse me," the voice said, too loud for the size of the room. "I need to speak to whoever owns the building at 912 Clark Avenue, right now." I knew the voice before I turned. Ethan. I didn't move. I kept my eyes on the papers in front of me, the corner of my red notebook just barely sticking out from under a folder. The front desk clerk blinked at him. "Sir, you'll need to submit a formal—" "No," Ethan cut in. "I'm not filling out another form. I'm not waiting on another email. I live there, and I want to know who's running things, who's deciding our rent goes up while nothing gets fixed." He was taller than I remembered. Or maybe I was just seeing him for the first time without the softening lens of motherhood. his jaw clenched with every word. His hands were balled fists at his sides. I watched from the corner. He didn't look at me, didn't glance past the edge of the cubicle, didn't even register the woman sitting 3 feet away from him, the one who used to pack his lunches and iron his shirts and hold him through storms. The clerk stayed calm. That information is protected. Ownership is managed through a private trust. Ethan scoffed. So no one's accountable? Great. That explains a lot. His voice was cracking, not from volume, but from frustration that had nowhere to land. He was used to being heard, to being right, and now he was lost in a system designed not to care about his last name. I could have stood up, I could have said, "Hello, Ethan," but I didn't. I sat there, still, invisible by choice for the first time in my life. He turned, muttered something under his breath, and stormed out. The door rattled behind him. Silence returned like a sigh. The clerk looked at me and raised an eyebrow. "Tenants," she said. I nodded slowly. But inside my chest was a quiet storm, because he came looking for power, and didn't even see the person holding it. Sitting in plain sight behind a stack of folders, wearing the same hands that once taught him how to tie his shoes. He wasn't always this way. Ethan used to laugh with his whole body, shoulders bouncing, head thrown back, the kind of laugh that made strangers smile. As a little boy, he was soft-hearted, emotional in ways that surprised even me. He cried when we stepped on a spider once, cried harder when he realized I flushed it. He used to leave notes for me, crooked little drawings folded into his lunchbox. "Love you, Mommy." Misspelled always, but honest. He had a teddy bear named Franklin he refused to sleep without until he was nearly 10. Sensitive, his teachers said. Gentle. But gentle boys don't stay gentle for long in this world, not unless someone teaches them how to hold on to it. I thought I did. Maybe I didn't. When he met Mallory, he was 24. I remember the way his eyes lit up when he said her name. Mallory this, Mallory that. She was smart, put together, confident, the kind of woman who walked into a room and made people adjust their posture. She had a way of sharpening everything around her, herself included. Ethan softened to meet her sharpness. I thought that was balance. I thought that was growth. The first time I noticed a change was at dinner, maybe a year into their marriage. I made his favourite dish, chicken and dumplings, just like his grandmother used to make. He ate slowly, distracted, barely touching the biscuit. Mallory smiled tightly. "Ethan's trying to cut carbs," she said, not unkind, but not kind either. And Ethan just nodded. He didn't even look at me. That was the first flinch. Small, almost forgettable. But they kept stacking, those little flinches. His voice, a little more careful. His shoulders, a little more tense. The way he apologized for things that didn't need apologizing. He started answering my calls less often, then not at all. And I, fool that I was, assumed it was just adulthood. That growing up meant growing away. I told myself I should be proud he didn't need me. But maybe he did. Maybe he was just waiting for me to say something. Maybe I failed him when he started folding himself smaller to make room for someone louder. Maybe I taught him too much about being good, and not enough about being honest, about standing up, about walking away when love starts to feel like a leash. He wasn't always this way, but somewhere along the line he stopped laughing with his whole body and started measuring his worth by how quietly he could survive in his own home. She knocked like she didn't want to be heard, soft, uncertain, one knuckle at a time. I opened the door and found her standing there in a wrinkled coat, mascara smudged, hair tied back like she hadn't meant to leave the house but did anyway. Mallory. I didn't say her name. I just stepped aside. She hesitated, then crossed the threshold like the floor might collapse beneath her. She didn't sit. She stood near the window, arms folded, eyes flicking toward the table, then away. I left him, she said, voice low. 2 days ago. I didn't react. I didn't ask why. But she went on anyway. Like the words had been stuck in her throat so long, they were spilling out now without permission. I packed a bag, told him I was going to stay with a friend. But I didn't. I came here. Her voice cracked. I didn't know if you'd open the door. Still, I said nothing. I wasn't going to ask for anything, she added quickly. This isn't about money, I just needed to say something. Out loud. Finally. She looked at me then. Really looked. And I saw the woman she used to pretend to be unraveling, thread by thread. I was the one who printed that list, she said, the senior housing options. I left it on the counter. My jaw tightened, but I stayed silent. I told Ethan it was time, that it was becoming too much, that we needed space, that you'd understand. She laughed once, sharp, bitter. And the worst part, I actually believed I was doing the right thing. Like pushing you out was some kind of boundary, like it made me evolved. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her coat. I didn't expect you to land on your feet. I didn't think about where you'd go, I just wanted the house back, wanted the tension gone. I told myself you'd find somewhere, that Ethan would check in, that someone else would catch you. Her voice dropped to a whisper. But no one did. For the first time, I spoke. You were supposed to call me Mom, I said softly. She froze. That word meant something once, I added. You used it like a ribbon. Something pretty to wrap around control. Mallory didn't answer. She didn't apologize. She didn't beg. She just stood there holding the silence between us like a fragile gift. And I didn't take it. Not yet. Because forgiveness, that's not something you give in the doorway. It's something you earn in the hallways after. The meeting was scheduled for 6:30 sharp, in the community room on the first floor. The chairs were plastic, the lighting too bright, and someone had brought stale cookies on a paper plate. It felt like every other tenant meeting, until it wasn't. I arrived early, sat in the back, charcoal blazer, dark jeans, hair pulled back, not tight, not severe, just deliberate. I looked like someone no one would notice unless I wanted them to. Tenants trickled in, grumbling, chatting, checking their phones. Then I saw them. Ethan walked in first, Mallory a few steps behind. He looked tired, not just physically, but in that deep, bone-worn way people carry when their world has shrunk without warning. Mallory didn't meet anyone's eyes. She clutched a folder to her chest like it could protect her. They didn't see me. Not yet. The property manager opened with the usual updates: landscaping schedule, trash policy, pest control. A few tenants asked questions, most just wanted to get home. Then came the part I'd waited for. We'd like to thank Willowfern Holdings, the manager said, for their investment in improving the property. The co-owner is here tonight in case anyone has questions about future plans. Heads turned. I stood. My heels clicked softly on the tile as I walked to the front. Slow, steady, every step echoing in the room. When I faced them, I didn't look at Ethan first. I looked at the group. A dozen tenants in folding chairs, mouths slightly open, unsure what to make of the woman in front of them. My name is Martha Whitaker, I said, calm and clear. I'm one of the owners of this building. Gasps aren't always loud. Sometimes they're just silence that falls too fast. Ethan blinked. Once. Twice. Like his brain couldn't catch up to what his eyes were telling him. Mallory froze. Her fingers dug into the edge of her folder. Ethan stood abruptly. You? I nodded. This is some kind of joke. No joke, I said softly. Just business. He stared at me like I was a ghost. Mallory looked away, jaw clenched. I turned back to the group. If anyone has questions about the improvements or your leases, I'll be here after the meeting. That was all. I stepped aside. The manager resumed the agenda, but the room never really settled again. Ethan didn't sit. He just stood there, breath shallow, fists clenched, as the meeting rolled on around him. And for the first time in his life, He had no idea what to say to his mother when she finally stood in a room full of strangers and didn't shrink. The room emptied slowly. Some tenants stayed behind to ask about the insulation schedule, the new security cameras, the garden beds near the east lot. Normal things. Safe things. No one said what they were really thinking. Except one woman, older, like me. She waited until the others left, then leaned in and said, "Good for you." I didn't smile. I just nodded, because it wasn't about that. It never was. Ethan stood off to the side, arms crossed, jaw tight. Mallory was gone. She'd slipped out somewhere between discussion and disbelief. He didn't speak. Not yet. And maybe he wouldn't. So I did what I'd come to do. Not to gloat, but to explain. Not to justify, but to remind. I stepped back to the front and spoke not to him, but to the room. I didn't want revenge, I said quietly. I wanted memory. A few heads turned. The ones still packing their folders paused. This building, I continued, this neighborhood, these walls, they're more than just property. They hold stories of first jobs and last goodbyes, of children being born and parents fading away, of women like me who were told their best years were behind them, who were asked to be quiet and grateful and gone. I let the silence stretch, let the weight of it settle like dust. My family forgot where they came from, forgot that meals weren't magic, that someone stirred the pot and scrubbed the pan. That love wasn't endless, unless you tended to it. I didn't look at Ethan. I didn't need to. I don't own this building to prove a point, I said. I own it because someone once gave me the idea that I could, because someone believed I had worth, even when I didn't. I stepped down, gathered my papers, folded the red notebook in half and slid it into my bag. Ethan still didn't move, but when I passed him, he spoke, just once. "Why didn't you tell me?" I paused in the doorway, turned my head just enough to meet his eyes. "Because you weren't listening." Then I left. No fanfare, no dramatic goodbye, just the soft click of my shoes down the hallway and the echo of a moment I never thought would come. I didn't need to see his face crumble, because some lessons don't come with raised voices or slammed doors. Some come in the shape of a mother, standing tall, speaking truth, and finally choosing herself. She came back 3 days later holding a cardboard box like it was glass. Mallory stood on my doorstep with her hair down, eyes red, coat buttoned wrong. She didn't ask to come in, just waited, breath visible in the cold air. I stepped aside. She entered quietly like someone walking into a church, placed the box on my table and stepped back like it might explode. "I found it in the hall closet," she said, voice low. "I was looking for the holiday lights. This was in the back, behind some photo albums. I think it was yours." I didn't move. I knew what was in that box. I'd packed it myself the night I left, hands shaking, not sure if I'd ever unpack again. She lifted the top and pulled out a small, worn notebook. Not the red one Dolores gave me, but older. Leather cracked at the corners, a ribbon marking the middle. "I read it," she whispered, like a confession. I nodded once, slowly. "I figured you might." She looked up at me then, eyes wet. No makeup, no script. "I didn't know. Martha, I didn't know you were going through all that. I didn't know you felt that invisible, that afraid." I wanted to tell her, "You knew something," but I didn't. She sat at the edge of the couch, hands clutching the journal like it was still warm from my skin. "You wrote that you thought no one would notice if you disappeared, that you didn't want to wake us when you left, that you didn't even cry until the vending machine ate your last dollar." Her voice cracked. I sat across from her, fingers laced in my lap. "That journal," I said, "wasn't meant for anyone. It was the only place I told the truth because I didn't trust my own voice anymore." Mallory nodded, silent tears sliding down her cheeks. "I thought you were strong," she whispered. "In that cold, quiet way people expect women to be. But I never thought about the cost. I didn't ask what it took for you to sit at our table and smile while we erased you 1 inch at a time. The room was still. She placed the journal back in the box with a reverence I hadn't seen in her before. I can't undo what we did, she said, but I needed to say it. Out loud, without asking for anything in return. I looked at her then. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw not the woman who pushed me out, but the one finally brave enough to knock and carry the weight of what she broke. I washed the sheets twice, not because they were dirty, but because I wanted the room to smell like lavender and light. I fluffed the pillows, opened the window for fresh air, folded the quilt at the end of the bed like my mother used to. Not too tidy, not too inviting, just ready. The room was small, quiet, simple. A chair by the window, a book on the nightstand, a lamp with a soft amber bulb. I didn't make it for anyone in particular, just in case. Just in case someone needed a place to land. And I was strong enough this time not to disappear in the process. It was late afternoon when I heard the knock. Not sharp, not hesitant, just there. I opened the door. Ethan stood on the porch, alone. No folder in his hand, no expression rehearsed. Just a man who used to be a boy, who used to call me Mommy when he was scared of thunder. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired a nap would fix, the kind that settles in your bones when pride gets too heavy. I don't have a speech, he said. Good, I replied, stepping back. He walked in slowly like someone entering a house they used to live in but no longer recognize. His eyes flicked around the room. The bookshelves, the photo on the wall, the smell of lemon polish. I didn't offer tea. I didn't ask questions. He sat on the couch and rubbed his hands together like he didn't know what they were for. I was wrong, he said finally. I waited. I thought I was protecting Mallory. I thought I was protecting our space. I told myself you were strong enough to figure it out, that you'd bounce back. He looked at me, his voice barely above a whisper. But that wasn't strength. That was me taking your love for granted. I didn't nod. I didn't reach for him. I just sat. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone sit in their own silence. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head down. Not crying, not angry, just still. And in that stillness I saw the boy he used to be. I didn't forgive him with words. I didn't say, "It's okay." It wasn't, but I let him stay. And later, when I passed the spare room, I saw his coat folded neatly on the chair, the lamp still glowing. The door gently closed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace take a seat next to grief, without asking for anything more. I sat at the kitchen table with the window cracked open, the late spring air drifting in, carrying the scent of fresh grass and something faintly sweet, maybe lilac, maybe memory. The house was quiet, except for the soft tick of the clock and the hum of the refrigerator. And me. I opened my red notebook, the one Dolores gave me back when I didn't know who I was, without someone else's approval. It was full now, full of grief, full of small victories, full of names I'll never forget and lessons I hope I never have to relearn. But today, I didn't write. Today, I recorded. I found an old voice recorder in the drawer, dusted it off, pushed the button. And I spoke. Not for Ethan. Not for Mallory. Not even for Dolores, though she would have smiled. I spoke for me. My name is Martha Whitaker, I said slowly, clearly. And I was never just a guest. I was never just an extra mouth. I was never the burden they made me believe I was. I paused. Let the silence hold the words for a moment before I continued. They tried to reduce me to an inconvenience, a budget line, a room at the end of the hall. My voice didn't shake. It didn't need to rise. It was steady, like roots under the soil. But I was always the root, and roots don't go quietly. I let that sit, let it echo back to me in the stillness. Then I took a deep breath. I used to think love meant staying quiet, making space, shrinking, but real love, the kind that matters, makes room. It doesn't ask you to vanish. Another breath. If you're hearing this, and you've ever been made to feel small, unwanted, inconvenient, I see you, I've been you, and I want you to know you matter. I stopped the recording, saved it. Maybe one day I'll send it to Ethan, maybe I won't. I reached for my teacup, chamomile, still warm, and wrapped both hands around it. Out the window, the sky was the colour of bruised lavender. Birds chirped like they hadn't a care in the world. I brought the cup to my lips, let the steam touch my face, closed my eyes, and then, gently, I set the cup down. The porcelain met the wood with a soft clink. A sound so quiet, you'd miss it if you weren't listening. But not me. Not anymore. What part of this story touched you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read them. If this story felt close to your heart, give it a like, subscribe if you want to be part of a space where real stories matter. Got a couple more minutes? Check out the next story. It's also about the things we rarely say out loud.